All right, welcome back to another episode of Project M. I'm Tanner Guzzi here with my co-host Brandon King.
Hey guys.
And today we're excited to talk to you about a subject that is not going to be a very easy one to tackle.
No, although we've been thinking about it for a
Right,
while.
and I think that it's going to be one that's definitely worth discussing. But before we go into that, we want to talk to you guys about what our current challenge is because we finished the Bod Pod challenge and we've now moved on to something else.
Yeah, video will be up soon.
Yes, you guys will see that one very soon.
Yeah.
Okay, so Brandon, tell us about what this current challenge is.
Yeah, so we thought about something that would be different than the typical fitness challenge, or like, I guess you'd say our last two challenges have both been fitness.
Yep.
One in terms of performance, one in terms of weight loss. So yeah, this one was more of a skills challenge, but still very much a manly skill of shooting. Yeah. Marksmanship.
Yeah, marksmanship, shooting, accuracy.
However you want to put it. Yeah, so we went up little to shooting range, a couple miles north of us, shot with.
I'm keeping that in.
Shot with. No, we did not do that. We shot. Shot with my cousin. He's a pretty experienced shooter. I don't know these terms, man.
Right?
Like,
But that's
beginners, yeah?
No, exactly. I think that's such a good point because we don't know all the technical terms.
Yeah.
We have no idea. I mean, you and I both own guns.
Right.
We have concealed carry permits, but there's not a lot of experience or not a lot of typical training beyond kind of what's expected. And that was by design that we want to get better at this.
And that's kind of what spurred this challenge, right?
Right.
It's something that we have, something that we believe in, but definitely needed to level up our skills.
Absolutely.
In that arena. And probably, hopefully something that a lot of guys can learn from. I think Nate shared a lot of good knowledge that will help everybody just know how to even start thinking about getting better.
Definitely.
In that area.
Okay, so what was it that we were actually doing? Because obviously there's a bunch of different tests of marksmanship.
Yeah, so I think it was a really good test, actually. Nate put us through the U.S. Air Marshal
basically just the qualification, the pistol test.
Yeah. So something that everybody could do, really, not very much specialized equipment.
Right.
Relatively quick to put together.
It was 7, 8 rounds?
Yeah, I think 7 rounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, 30 rounds total.
Yeah.
I think.
By rounds, we mean 7 different things that we need to do. By 30 rounds, we mean you fired 30 bullets.
30 bullets.
30 rounds,
shots. Yep. Easy to quantify, easy to gauge improvement.
Yep, because it was based on timing and accuracy of our shots. Yep. And it was basically different things like having to fire at different targets, having to draw from your holster, having to do it based on if you're turning around or, basically a few different tests for it.
Pivoting from one target to the next. So just overall good check on our skill. Good baseline. So I'm excited to see how we can improve and move on from there.
Right, because now the plan is, this is one of those things, and I like that this is one of the appeals to this, is that we can do our training and our practice without actually having to fire another live round.
Single round. Yeah.
Exactly. So we can do stuff that's all dry fire in the home where we're practicing how quickly can you draw, how quickly can you change magazines, how good is your accuracy as far as when you feel that trigger pull or you lined up in your sights. And so for you guys who would like to do this with us, go do it this week, see how it goes. And then, just practice at home. And we'll obviously be posting up stuff on our Instagram and things like that as we're going through these dry fire drills and playing around with this and seeing if we can get any better at it.
Yeah, and we're noobs at it, right?
Totally.
I mean, it's so easy to get in there and say.
Well, and I love that you and I were both strong in opposite areas. Brandon was faster than I am, and I was a little bit more accurate. And it was close.
It was close on both.
Exactly, which is what makes it fun because now the competition is which of us is going to level up more. Exactly. So I'm excited about it. Okay.
So that'll be fun.
So obviously we'll continue to do challenges, check-ins as we go through the month and we kind of get ready for this. And we'll make sure that there's a link below for you guys who are watching this on YouTube to be able to see what the test actually is, so you can go test yourselves with it.
For sure.
Yep. Okay. So that aside, or I guess that kind of that housekeeping done, we want to talk to you guys today about a concept of shame and group shame and what that means and whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing. And I love that Brandon and I both come at this from different points, but even as we've talked about this a little bit, I think we largely arrive at the same conclusion.
Yeah, we come
which
more
the
and more,
conclusion,
I don't know if it's the middle or but I think we intersect somewhere. Yeah.
Exactly. And this was brought on by a tweet that I had seen. Now it's been like a month, and I sent this over to Brandon.
October 2nd.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, about 2 weeks. Yeah, okay, so not too bad. It just feels like a month, right? Especially with the internet.
Yeah.
Okay, so Brandon, why don't you read this for us, and then we can talk about this topic.
From Andrew Lochner. Forgive me, Andrew. So he tweets, unpopular opinion, shaming needs to be brought back. It's the only form of, quote, control to correct deviant behavior that isn't technically illegal but has large negative repercussions over time. Our shameless culture is why the majority of Americans are overweight. And then he goes on to unpack that a little bit. He says, so here's the problem. There are negative ideas that happen that aren't good for the individual and, more importantly, aren't good for society as a whole. But some of these things are behaviors, habits, norms that can't be corrected by law and shouldn't be corrected by a legal system, but more by cultural pushback against them. I'll give some examples in the next tweet. Won't be exhaustive list. Smoking, vaping, alcoholism, promiscuity, laziness, pettiness. On it goes. How many memes? Yeah. So his proposed solution to this is shaming of such behavior. The ignoring of, or worse, celebration of it clearly hasn't done our culture any good, but with that comes some concerns because no idea is airtight without its cons. So then he says, people pointed out that excessively shaming behaviors just drive them underground, where it becomes a rebellious subculture. Some people say you can't have standards without shaming. If all we do is point from our high horse, we do nothing. But if we push uniformly against these kind of things, shame them, while also making a cogent argument against them and offering a helping hand where applicable, it's more likely to work.
Okay, so obviously a lot to dive into on that.
Lot to unpack.
But I love the idea of the first thing of the idea that a legal code is not enough and should never be enough as far as just curbing bad behavior.
Yeah, Libertarian Brandon agrees with that part.
Absolutely, right? That it shouldn't be this idea that if something is bad, it should be illegal, especially because then we come up with this false conflation of if something is legal, therefore it's good.
Right.
And they're huge problems with
morality
that.
and legality,
Totally
separate.
They should be very separate things. And I think we're in a culture that tends to forget that. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously we start off on a good place with that.
Yeah.
But then the idea of having a culture of shame, and I think one thing that's important is we need to, I guess, kind of distinguish, because shame is a term that can mean a bunch of different things to a bunch of different people. And so at least according to our interpretation of this, and as we've talked about this amongst ourselves, the idea of shame is somehow feeling that you have let a group down by engaging in a particular behavior, or that you have lost status within that group. It's not... Because a lot of times people like conflate, or they will say guilt is I've done something wrong and shame is I'm a bad person. It's an internalization of bad things. And that's not what we're talking about.
Right.
We're talking about how it relates with a group in general, or a culture, or a family, or whatever else.
Yeah, and I think some of this is going to come down to semantics, and that's fine. But I think I don't know. Maybe just start out with where you stand on the tweet, like what you agree with, if there's anything you disagree with.
Okay, so for the most part, I agree with this.
Yeah.
Because I do think that we as people we're group animals, and the idea that you can do what you want and not think that it has any sort of effect on other people just because it doesn't have an immediate effect on other people is naive and short-sighted. And within the group's best interests, but then also even within the individual's best interests. They're, in fact, even more so within the individual's best interests. The idea that I shouldn't do something because other people will think less of me, or I should do something because other people will think more of me, I think can be a really good leveraging point for improving behavior. Okay. And so in a lot of regards, I very much agree with this idea.
Okay. Yeah, I think I agree with the spirit of the tweet. As I was reading back through it today, I think I agree with the general ideas. I think where I kind of clash with it or come up against it is because I agree with what you say. Not every, and what we just talked about, that definitely the legality of something should not determine whether someone feels okay doing it or validated in their actions. That definitely needs to come from a society at whole. Like there needs to be a larger cultural control.
We can't just rely on the law for that stuff.
A control for that thing. I think what it comes down to for me is the idea of shaming and what that implies and how that's implemented that I disagree with.
Okay, elaborate on that.
Okay, so I looked up, I think we do need to get a definition of shame.
Okay.
So Merriam-Webster, a painful emotion caused by consciousness of guilt, shortcoming, or impropriety.
Okay.
Shaming, which I think is something else.
Ooh, good distinction.
The act or activity of subjecting someone to shame, disgrace, humiliation, or disrepute, especially by public exposure or criticism.
Okay.
So I think that's where my clash comes. I think shame is something that's okay to be felt. I think if you feel shame for something, that's totally natural. And if that's a consequence of how whatever pressure is put on you.
Right.
Yeah, I feel shame
that's
for
a good
things.
thing.
Yeah. I'm overweight. I feel shame for it. I probably should feel shame for it. I think the problem I have with this is the way that pressure is applied. And when your intent is to shame, disgrace, humiliate, or disrepute somebody, you're going about things the wrong way.
Okay, so then would you say the idea of you as the person who is engaged in something wrong,
Yeah.
that you feeling shame is a good thing. But as a person who witnesses somebody doing something wrong, the active verb of shaming that person is not a
Yeah.
good thing.
I agree with the shaming. Yeah, not a good thing.
Okay.
Probably not in almost all situations that I can think of. Yeah, shaming someone, probably not the way you should approach it. Me feeling shame, I think there's some that's warranted and probably some shame that's not warranted.
Okay.
Right? There's, depending on the person, I think you can go
Yeah,
into
that's a
that.
whole rabbit hole, right?
Yeah, a whole rabbit hole of how apt someone is to feel
Right.
guilt or shame for something that may or may not be wrong.
Right, which is it's a really good distinction to bring in there because you have people who fall on very different points of the spectrum as far as I really care to the point of too much what other people think of me, or I'm a sociopath and I don't care at all what anybody else thinks of me, and shame doesn't really come into play. And I guess then that's where you could make the argument that that's where the legal system
Right.
should come into play, is that fills in the holes where societal shame can't quite cover all the bases.
And that's, I think, where maybe it comes down to semantics and where I agree with him, because when he says in the tweet, if we can push uniformly against these kind of things while also making a cogent argument, it's a great vocabulary word, I have to look down, cogent argument against them and offering a helping hand where applicable, it's more likely to work, which I think is a good.
That's a good caveat there, or
good
something that
caveat.
needs to be added in.
But I would argue that may not be shaming based on the definition that we just gave.
Right. Okay. So then the question becomes, how do you allow the person
Yeah.
to feel and experience the shame to the point where there's still a desire to improve, that they feel ostracized or they've let everybody else down, but then at the same time, you can still extend a helping hand so that it's not this now permanent, you go to the leper colony,
Right.
we don't want anything to do with you.
Well, if you're taking some action to help them feel shame, aren't you shaming them?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess my response would be like, you probably shouldn't. If you're helping them with the intent of making them feel a certain way, you're trying to. That's not. So okay. So my answer would be, we shouldn't be shaming. We should be educating, helping, instructing, disciplining for sure.
Okay.
For sure, disciplining, levying consequences where appropriate.
Right.
But none of those should be with the intent of making someone manipulate their emotions.
Gotcha. Okay. Especially because for the most part, that can really be done just by, because, okay, I like this. This is different than how we've tackled this before. And I like this
Yeah.
distinction because one of the differences is we get this idea of there should be no shame. You shouldn't have to feel this or anything else. But then the problem is that just means any and every behavior is allowable.
Yeah.
And so just by virtue of saying that's not allowable, let me help you to improve and do better, that triggers an internal sense of shame. It's like, oh crap, I'm not up to par. And so, oh, that's very interesting. You're right. Even just by extending a helping hand, you're not living up to the standard. Let me help you live up to the standard. That will trigger shame
It may or may not.
if the person is, calibrated correctly.
May or may
And
not.
maybe they don't even need the shame
Maybe
at that
they don't
point.
need the shame.
Right?
Maybe they just need. I mean, if you tell me like, "Hey, Brandon, you're fat. Like, you should lose some weight." Like, that's not probably an appropriate thing to say in our society. But like, I can. Oh, I had no idea I was fat. Like, maybe I haven't looked in the mirror for
Right.
a couple weeks. Like, maybe I don't feel shame. The chances are I am going to feel some.
Right,
sort of
but maybe you
embarrassment.
don't. Maybe it's just I didn't even think about
Okay,
it. You're
yeah,
right. Let's
yeah.
fix this. But that's very different than we're so shame avoidant that it's you can't even tell somebody you could lose a few pounds.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And so it's not we have to proactively go out of our way to make people feel shame.
Right.
But it is if we hold to a standard and shame ends up being a byproduct of that, that's not a negative thing.
Not necessarily a negative thing.
Gotcha.
And I think what's interesting about this is something you got close to as I was thinking about this is I think if you take this tweet literally, there kind of becomes a double standard that I don't want to put
No,
ideas
we're taking it
to-
from we're taking it from our perspective.
But we talk about like, fat shaming or skinny shaming
Mm-hmm.
or whatever shaming, and I don't know that you can call that out and say that doesn't exist while at the same time saying the way that we should push against these ideas of being obese or whatever is by shaming. I think there's a paradox there that you can't you can't hold that word in both hands.
that there's some mutual exclusivity there.
Yeah, and so I think like fat shaming in the context that I'm taking about, if you're shaming someone for being fat, I think a lot of people will say like, oh, well, fat shaming's fine. And I don't think fat shaming is fine, but in the way that we've talked about it, it might be okay to instruct somebody or help them or move them along.
Well, and again, there's that whole degree now of, hey, you're fat, lose the weight, or I'm going to continue to post up the ideal physique. And this is what we're going
Right.
to see in advertisements and in media. And we're going to continue to reward people and treat people better who actually do attain that kind of level, which is a natural course of action that happens based on that when we
Right.
see things that are ideal. And so it's not, promoting the positive can make people feel shame for not attaining that level, but it's not, hey, fatty, go to the leper colony.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so then my question related to that then is there any point in which active shaming actually is appropriate?
I think it depends on who you ask. I did a little bit more. So, in full disclosure, this is the second time we're recording.
Yes, this was another one you guys listened to like 2 or 3 episodes ago where we had to do a re-record. This is the
And
other
I think
one
it's
that
worth
was the
mentioning
same
that
thing.
we kind of hashed back and forth a little bit more on this, and we came down to being very just like,
We don't know the answer. Yeah.
So I came into this like this record. I mean, that was a couple weeks ago.
Uh-huh.
I mean,
Yeah, it was 2 weeks
kinda
ago.
right when
Yeah.
this tweet came out. And so I kind of came into this one a little bit more well read on.
Good, you did your
I
homework.
did a little bit of homework.
Okay.
And it kind of depends on who you ask, because some people do bring up the idea of reintegrative shaming.
Okay.
That's an idea I found.
Elaborate on that one,
Which
yeah.
I would say isn't really shaming based on the way I've just talked about it, right? But he kind of says shaming can be reintegrative where attention is drawn to a wrongdoing or a perceived wrongdoing in such a way to communicate respect for the person by people who love, care, and accept the person. It opens up the possibility of repair.
So it's like we need to have an intervention.
I would say that's not shame at all, because largely that's not going to be done in a public place in order to
Right.
humiliate or embarrass them.
Right.
So I would say that's not shaming. That's just discipline. That's correction.
Yes.
That's
And I wonder if we just see it as shaming because we're so far removed from
Exactly.
any potential idea of actual intentional shame
exactly.
that
And that's where I think, that idea of shaming as it's used in culture gets. I don't know. Maybe you just can't. I can't put it into words, but like there's two definitions there and two ways
Right.
that it's used that I can't bring together.
Right. Okay, so there's 2 thoughts that come to mind as you talk about that. One, and this is actually something that happened to me today. I posted up a video of some of our stuff related to the air marshal test, and I had a couple of my online buddies that pointed out the recoil is too strong. You're not holding your grip right.
Yeah.
And I appreciate these guys coming and saying that. One of my good buddies basically said, "Yeah, you got to stop with that limp wristed crap. Your wrists are too weak." And to some extent, you could say that that's an active shaming thing.
Sure.
But it's also very much done in a banter component,
Yeah.
and it's done with guys who love, trust, respect each other. And so that, to me, that idea of that more active shame, and dare I say even like with some cultures taking it to the point of hazing or things like that, can actually be a way to increase and tighten a
Yeah,
bond
sure.
within the group of guys who are in there, as opposed to, and maybe it's on a micro scale, because that would be very different than if just everybody were to treat, where it's like,
Right.
we've lost all respect for Mr. Guzzi because he can't hold his firearm right. His
Right.
wrists are too weak. That would be more of a deterrent. Whereas with my friends and when we're razzing each other about it and stuff like that, I still want to improve. And
Right.
a little bit of that pressure from those guys, it's like, okay, they recognize that I'm not good at this. That's all good. But maybe by virtue of it being more active in direct shaming, it actually makes it less of a blow.
Well, we talked today about how like it's nice that you can tease your wife, right?
Yes.
And like, you say things to your wife that like, I said something not very nice to my wife yesterday that I wouldn't say to anyone else.
Right.
I'm not going to repeat
Well, you do
here.
feel bad for guys who can't tease their wives
Yeah,
because
exactly.
it does bring in an element to the relationship.
And I think that's kind of just a different question entirely. Yeah, people you're close with, you say things to that you won't.
Right,
you-
like the Spanish culture where, they, hey, gorda.
yeah,
you
exactly.
call your wife fatty all the time.
Right.
And yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that that's actually hazing. If
No.
there's trust and you have that relationship
Exactly.
there. I'm not saying you've got to be a dry, just boring human.
Right. Okay. So there's that. And then the other thing that came to mind was the idea of this reintegration where you allow somebody to experience the punishment and then they're immediately brought back into the fold. And an example that comes to my mind in this was, I think it's the first episode of Vikings.
Okay.
Where there's a guy, I don't remember what it was that he did. He probably stole something and the whole village lines up and he basically has to run the gauntlet.
Yeah.
And so he runs through and everybody whips him and beats him and it's physically painful and it's a little bit humiliating and embarrassing. And then as soon as he gets through, then it's claps on the back and everybody's welcomed him back into the fold
Yeah.
and everything's awesome. Whereas what we see with corrections or anything else is either that it doesn't happen, or when you see it from a legal case, or even within a church context or within a group of friends or anything, it's okay, you've now paid the price and I'm treating you totally differently because I don't know if I can ever trust you again.
Right, yeah. One of the articles I read did talk about it in the context of parenting. And it kind of made that differentiation that when you shame your child, they're going to feel hurt, embarrassed. It's not going to strengthen the bond between you and the child.
Right.
Which is a way that you can tell if you're shaming them. If you're taking action that causes a gap in your relationship, you're probably shaming. If you're disciplining, if you're correcting, like a parent should, it will actually be an experience that draws you both closer together.
Right.
And the child
because it increases their trust in you, their
Exactly.
respect for you. You have more respect for them because you can actually see them growing as they go
Right.
through it.
They'll recognize that they did something wrong, but that they're not bad people because
Right.
of it. They just did something wrong, and there will be consequences for that.
Definitely.
It doesn't mean you should take away consequences or, punishment of some sort if there are for what they did. But in the end, yeah, there will be more respect, and you'll be closer.
Right.
In that relationship.
Well, and I think that, yeah, what's so important is that increased showing of love after the discipline aspect,
Yeah.
where it's not, okay, well, now we're at 50%
Right.
until you earn the right. And then maybe you're at 25%. Yeah. It's no, if you pay the price, we see the improved behavior, or as soon as your kid gets out of timeout, back to normal.
Well, I don't think they even have to pay the price. I think the whole point is that,
Yeah, the contrition.
yeah, big words, but they don't have to go through something to earn your love back or your respect back.
You're right. That's a good point too, because you're right, we do have this kind of false dichotomy of I am punishing you and I cannot be showing love to you while I'm
Right.
doing that, and those are very different
Very
things.
different things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so then, is there a way to do this on a broader spectrum?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think when it comes, so yeah, you talk about I think that comes down to the what can you do, right? And I think when we talked about this the first time, I got a little hippie about this. Just focus on yourself.
Right.
You do you, improve yourself. And I still believe that.
Yes.
That in general, my initial gut reaction to this tweet was, oh gosh, Twitter's out there just pointing fingers and saying we need to be pointing more fingers.
Right.
If anything, that's
Not the case.
not what Twitter needs to be doing. Most people, and I still believe this, that most people on Twitter with Hot Take Twitter would be better off focusing on what they can do better.
Okay.
Looking at taking because there are some good people on Twitter. There's
Right.
some good inspiration.
Well, and again, that's the whole thing we're trying to do with Project M.
Exactly.
Is we're trying to improve ourselves in as many different ways as possible, and hopefully kind of create an environment where other guys can do that too.
Right.
As opposed to, let's just get on and let's talk about how much we hate all the people who aren't like
Right.
us. Yeah.
Because there is pressure that you can put on people by being fit.
Yes,
The fat example is just so easy.
it is.
here,
It's
right?
an easy one.
By being fit, active person, I think inherently you do put pressure on your neighbors.
Yes.
Your neighbor sees you hauling back in your driveway after a 15-mile run, dripping with sweat and looking fine. You're not shaming them.
Right. But they're feeling some of that.
there's something there.
Or they see you've got a great dynamic with your wife. Or they see that your kids are cheerful and social and well behaved. Or, yeah, I guess you could say all the stereotypes of keeping up with the Joneses, and you take all the monetary aspects out of that.
Right.
But it's just does he look like he enjoys his job? Is he friendly with other people? Is he in good shape? Do he and his wife look like they have a loving relationship? Are their kids well? And what's sad is we've now gotten to the point where we see all that as where all the skeletons that are buried.
Right.
But it doesn't have to be that way.
No, not necessarily. Yeah, and it doesn't have to come across as arrogant or whatnot. And you can also, I think you can be even more proactive than that. Again, there are situations where you can take it a step further rather that you don't have to be flaunting your great body as you run into your driveway. But if there is an opportunity, I think you can teach and talk about it.
Well, especially because at some point somebody's going to say something.
Yeah.
Oh, I wish I could do that. Cool, come do it with me.
Yeah.
I'll call you at 6 a.m. tomorrow. I deal with that a lot on Twitter, whereas we talk about the things that we're doing. I will get guys who say, oh, I wish I could do this, or I'm really interested in doing that. And my response is almost always, good, do it.
Yeah.
And that is a little bit of shame, a little bit of pressure, where it's not it would be really cool if you could do this too.
It's an
but
invitation.
it's do it. Yeah, come join us. Come do it. No, I think that's a really good idea. So it's not just the hippie kind of live your own life, but it is. And for me, the first time that we talked about this, my takeaways were just I don't know.
Yeah.
I had no conclusions
Right.
to come to. But as I've thought about this more, and especially as we've hashed this out even more between the two of us, I think the idea of do the best that you can to be as aspirational as possible, and then hold those aspirations up as desirable,
Yeah.
as wantable, as all these other things. And that may be It may be something as simple as like make your lawn look awesome. Take good care of your yard. Take care of your things. Take good care of yourself.
Yeah, whatever
Be
it is.
social. There's so many different ways that that can manifest, but just do your best to live to the ideal and then promote the ideal. And then when other people express whether it's interest or even resentment or something else, invite them to pursue that ideal with you. And the shame just kind of comes
Yeah,
along without you
invite,
having to be
educate.
shaming,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, yeah. I think I recently you've seen it. Like I've done a pretty big like I don't know if you call it like a 180, but a pretty big twist on my political views.
Right.
And I think it wasn't because someone told me I was an idiot for thinking what I thought.
Right.
It was an
Wait, you're saying all the Facebook debates didn't change
that
your mind? Yeah, right.
That didn't change my mind. It was someone saying, "Hey, you're interested in politics or whatever. Hey, here's an idea I have. Have you thought about this?
Yes.
Hey, here's a YouTube video. Watch this." And no one ever called the people I'm thinking of never called me stupid for
Mm-hmm.
following whatever politician, whatever ideology. It was just like, "Hey, here's an idea. Here's a thought. Have you
Yep.
thought about this? Let's talk about that. Why do you think that?"
Yes.
And but it takes carrying. It's harder. It's harder than pointing
It's
fingers.
so
and
much
saying,
harder, especially because you have to be willing to talk to the other person and not get defensive or not get
Right.
frustrated that they're not going at the same pace or that they're still holding on to different beliefs that you disagree with. Even if you're both equally educated on the
Right.
matter, you come to different conclusions.
Right.
And it's a lot more work, and it has to come from a position of more abundance, charity, benevolence, whatever else we want to come up with for it.
Yeah.
But it's a lot more difficult.
Yeah, but yeah, it's the only way. I think it's the only way to move forward. And it's if you're not happy with the way things are, I think that's the way to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
To move forward, because I think right now the reality is we're living in the world he describes. right?
Absolutely.
Shame is dictating what's right and wrong.
Right. And it's funny because it's just a different kind of shame.
It's just a different kind
Yeah.
of shame.
You're shamed for having an ideal, wanting to be aspirational as opposed to just letting everybody do
Yeah.
them, whatever
Yeah.
that looks like.
Right. So I think this definitely is a real principle.
Mm-hmm.
I think the way we approach it is not great, which is probably why I also had a strong negative reaction to this. Is I don't want this. This looks like the majority controlling just.
Right. It's mob rule.
Yeah, mob
if
rule.
if the biggest group thinks it's bad behavior, then we're going to treat you like that, and you're going to suffer the
Yeah, and we
consequences.
don't. If the majority right now, and you say the majority of the opinion out there right now
Mm-hmm.
is going to have more power to levy social pressure on me,
Right.
I don't want any more of
Welcome to cancel culture.
that. Right.
Yeah.
I don't need any more of that. in my life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially because it's not even the majority. It's just whoever is the most vocal, whoever's the most assertive about what their opinions are, that
Right.
can create that shame.
Right.
Okay, so I'm really happy that this is another one that we got to kind of re-record
Yeah.
because I feel like we've come to, at least for me, some better conclusions. And the idea that I love the most is that we get to promote and build a counterculture to whatever level we can, and that in and of itself will provide a little bit of the right kind of shame for me, for you, for the other people that we interact with, and that can be done without its shame
Right.
on you and all this
Yeah,
other.
you stop. I mean, the thing most people think of here is
Right,
they've
it's
seen
Game of Thrones. Yeah, not for me. Too
Yeah.
brutal for
Yeah.
me. And I've been shamed for
Right.
that, which is fine because that's even another little good point is sometimes we've dealt with that because of our religious beliefs and the way that we are in the world. And there
Sure.
were people who will try and shame you for that, and you have to be able to, especially when it comes to moral things, just say, "Cool, I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care. I have a higher standard that I need to live to other than does this particular group or culture care about what I'm doing." And so even then you could almost say like moral conviction, culture and shame and everything else that's cooked into that, and then a legal system
Right.
as far as priorities of what importance they should take, and if this one doesn't catch, then this one should catch, and if that one doesn't, then
Right.
this, and
Yeah.
kind of a good hierarchy
Sifting
that way.
down there, yeah.
Exactly. Awesome. Okay. Well, obviously, just like with everything else, really curious to hear what you guys have to say about
Yeah.
this. Like we said at the beginning, this is not an easy or a simple or in a lot of ways a fun subject, but it's fun. I don't know. It's fun for us to
Yeah.
kind of talk about and figure out, especially because we do live in a culture where you have to experience it, and you may experience it for things that you don't agree with, or you may not experience it for things that you wish you experienced it for. And so definitely let us know what your guys' take is on this, and we're going to talk to you guys on the next episode.
See you guys.